I would like to invite on David Barker. He is the Chief People Officer at Paddle, which is a revenue delivery platform for B2B software as a service companies. He is based outside of London. And Paddle is really interesting because it's currently building an office in central London in the Shoreditch neighborhood. And I thought it'd be really interesting to hear from David about how it's thinking about constructing an office as it prepares for a hybrid scenario. So David, walk us through a little bit, first of all, what your sort of schedule is going to be and what approach Paddle is taking to hybrid, and then maybe we can get into the particulars of how you'll be using the space and thinking about design and that sort of thing.
Yeah, of course. So thank you for allowing me to come and talk about this. This is an ever evolving, ever changing situation. And I don't think necessarily any company has got the right answers yet until we're actually starting to get unlocked a little bit further down the road. But, you know, we've actually been on Paddle's been on a very big journey over the last 6 months. We've actually done a full 180 in terms of how we believed that we thought we were going to be operating to where we are now. I'm sure he doesn't mind, but our CEO has basically done the full 180 himself. Beginning of the year, he turned around and said, you know, we are going to go back to the office 5 days a week. And I want that type of environment. We want that type of culture. And I was starting to help him a little bit just in terms of how we believed that some of our paddlers were starting to think about certainly what Lindsay's just shared. And some of what I call is sort of social scarring, that we don't necessarily know the impact of what we're actually facing, because this is a once in a lifetime event that we're all facing right now. So he's come round full 180. And so, you know, this hybrid, and we're trying to move away from labels right now. We like this idea of a digital first, rather than it being a hybrid or remote teams or fully working in the office. So we want to actually become digital first. So however we operate, and whether people are in the office or whether they're at home, we want to try to actually operate in a digital way, meaning that we capture things digitally. We are able to then circulate, you know, asynchronously or offline in terms of how we communicate. So this brings us quite nicely into actually how we're starting to structure and think about an office. So the dynamic, or the sort of criteria that we're looking for in terms of how we're thinking about this is a very fluid, very flexible workspace with a lot of space to be able to give to our paddlers. And really we want to actually work with every individual, every paddler, really at an adult to adult level, where we're having this conversation about where do you choose to work from that fits with you and your life to do your best work. So that's the philosophy we're going into actually building this. And that's really resonated with our paddlers. And I think that's the company we want to be, because we're starting now to grow internationally. We're about to open up an office in New York or somewhere along the East Coast. You know, that emphasis of actually that fluid, that flexibility, and ultimately choice that builds trust for our paddlers to do the best work where they are is something that we're really trying to strive for, and creating that environment.
So tell us, how many people are you talking about? How many paddlers are there? And what are they telling you about, you know, in answer to those questions you're asking them about where they want to work and how?
Yeah, so we're sort of constantly talking with them, and you know, and like Lindsay mentioned about these surveys, we're running a lot of surveys, but we don't know until really we open up, and when society opens up in a bit more of a freer way than it is today, in terms of how footfall and how confident people are going to be getting public transport, or the tube or the tram or the subway or wherever, you know, and we just actually don't know. So we're trying to take best guesses right now, and just trying to take the temperature. But ultimately, you know, again, the aim being that you know, the choice is there. You know, if one person feels comfortable one day coming into the office and not feel that they're comfortable coming in the next day, we can accommodate that because of the type of environment we want. So, through we've got an employee engagement tool. We're running one-off temperature check surveys, and now this trend of our own teams now saying, actually, we do want to work and have the opportunity to work in a more of a dynamic way that fits in not only to post-pandemic world, but actually to my life now, because my life changed. And so this integration of work and life now we want to make sure that it's productive and not unhealthy. So the well-being has to also come first. But it's going to be a fine balancing act. So I think we're going to have to iterate and improve, and there are really great technology and tools out there to be able to do this. So this online whiteboarding and actually how you integrate Zoom really cleverly into some of the off-sites that we run, and how we actually keep people engaged in multiple remote locations are things that we are actually starting to build for, particularly in this new office. So that office environment becomes really critical, of breakout rooms, flexible fluid movement of furniture that's able to move and move around the workplace. Again, plenty of space for people moving around. Breakout areas where we've got 2 meter spacing around and such like. So I think that the technology and digital environment becomes super important.
It's really interesting because this time a year ago, I think a common train of thought was that offices would reopen in sort of 2 steps. And the first would be sort of the sanitized sort of health and safety step with plexiglass everything, and masks and compartmentalized workspaces. And then at some point, once we got over the worst of the pandemic's health scare, we could then finally use the office for what we always wished we could, which is that collaboration, meeting space, maybe literally rubbing shoulders, which you would definitely not want to do in the throes of a pandemic. It kind of sounds like maybe there are some exceptions in terms of places that were deemed essential and that sort of thing. But it sounds like a lot of offices are maybe sort of skipping over that first step, or maybe taking some partway precautions. We at Quartz, we just reopened our New York office right after Memorial Day here in the U.S. And we have some capacity limitations right now, and we're going to gradually phase in increased numbers of people if they want to come back. Our CEO has declared us remote first, and nobody's going to be under any pressure to return to the office, at least through the end of the year. That raises all kinds of questions in and of itself. What does it mean in terms of managers? And if they're always going to the office, does that, even if we're saying we're remote first, does that put an unspoken pressure on people to come? If managers aren't in the office, does that mean that nobody's going to show up? There's all kinds of questions that we have to think about now. How, David, are you guys thinking about the health and safety aspects of it, or are you preparing to open for a time when people can genuinely be together?
Yeah, I think it's a great question. So I think where we started with this was getting our executive team aligned. And if we can't get our executive team aligned in terms of this new philosophy, then we would never have been able to actually promote and support our paddlers in making them feel that they didn't feel pressurized having to make their own call about how they feel about coming into an office, or vice versa, working from home. And it's taken some time, actually, even getting some of our leadership team along that journey. And so we've had to do a really interesting piece of work just to make sure and actually go through a very interesting journey with them, going through the 5 whys. Why is it important? Why is it important to have people in the office? Why is it that you need people around you? We've been operating in a way that has been supporting this type of way of working for the past 18 months. We've seen the business actually do very well, and Paddle's done very well out of this. And how can we actually use some of the positives in terms of how we've been operating and take that forward? And actually, really, this is about, and this is a muscle that we don't necessarily have just yet. in terms of managers managing in a remote world. But even if you take the pandemic away, opening up new offices in different geographical locations still drives how does a manager work in a remote way when you've got a remote team in a different location. So the challenges would still always be there. So, you know, part of what we're doing and building is a toolkit to actually support that in terms of giving clarity of goal and mission and clarity of terms of purpose of why teams exist, what's their purpose, what are they, breaking that down into goals and creating clarity for the paddler to be able to understand how they connect back up to their team and then ultimately what they deliver and achieve for paddle. And then you can then go into all of the world of reward and recognition and development and making sure that people feel that you know they have a voice and actually be part of the company. And that progression path then ultimately still exists, even if someone does still work remotely. So you know, these are challenges to overcome, but toolkits and development and training are actually will be coming as part of our journey on this.